My name is Rebecca, and I'm a 26-year-old software engineer. I'm not usually one to complain, but I had an encounter with an entitled person recently that I just can't keep quiet about. Her name was Karen. Yes, Karen. I know it's a stereotype, but in this case, it fits like a glove. It all started when I was waiting in line at the grocery store. I had a cart full of groceries and I was minding my own business when I heard someone clear their throat behind me. I turned around and saw Karen. She was in her early 40s with an over-the-top blonde bob and way too much makeup. She was wearing a designer outfit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. "Excuse me," she said, in a tone that made it clear she expected me to drop everything and pay attention to her. "Do you mind if I go ahead of you? I'm in a bit of a hurry." I glanced at my watch. I had plenty of time before my next meeting, but I didn't want to be rude. "Sure," I said, and stepped aside to let her pass. Karen didn't say thank you. Instead, she started unpacking her shopping bags and tossing items onto the conveyor belt without any regard for how they were arranged. I saw her toss a bag of apples on top of a container of strawberries and cringed inwardly. As the cashier started scanning Karen's items, I heard her mutter something under her breath about how slow the cashier was. I rolled my eyes. The cashier was doing her job just fine, and Karen was just being impatient. But things really escalated when Karen's card was declined. She started screaming at the cashier, accusing her of not knowing how to do her job properly. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. "I demand to speak to the manager." I sighed inwardly. I knew this was going to be one of those situations. I decided to stick around to see how it played out. When the manager arrived, Karen started laying into her as well. "Your cashier doesn't know how to do her job," she said, her voice rising to a high-pitched squeal. "I demand that you give me all of these groceries for free as compensation for my inconvenience." The manager tried to explain that it wasn't the store's fault that Karen's card was declined, but Karen wouldn't listen. She just kept shrieking and demanding and making a scene. At this point, I decided I'd had enough. I stepped forward and tapped Karen on the shoulder. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my tone civil. "I don't mean to interrupt, but you're causing a scene and it's making everyone uncomfortable. Maybe you could take your business elsewhere and come back when you're feeling a bit calmer?" Karen turned on me, her eyes blazing with fury. "Who do you think you are?" she spat. "Mind your own business." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm just trying to help diffuse the situation," I said. "But if you'd rather continue making a fool of yourself, that's fine with me." Karen opened her mouth to say something, but then her eyes flicked past me to someone standing behind me. "Oh, thank goodness," she exclaimed. "Officer, this woman is harassing me. Arrest her." I turned around and saw a police officer standing behind me, looking confused. "Ma'am, what seems to be the problem?" he asked. Karen launched into a tirade about how I was harassing her and how she wanted me arrested. I tried to explain the situation, but she talked over me and made it sound like I was the aggressor. The police officer seemed to be buying her story, and I started to panic. Just then, a voice spoke up from the line of customers behind me. "Excuse me," it said. "I saw the whole thing, and that woman is lying." She was causing a scene and being very rude to the cashier and the manager. This other woman was just trying to help calm her down. Karen turned around to face the customer who had spoken, but before she could say anything, the police officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store. You're causing a disturbance, and I can't allow that to continue." Karen started to protest, but the police officer was firm. "Ma'am, please leave now, or I'll have to arrest you for disorderly conduct." With a final glare at me, Karen grabbed her shopping bags and stormed out of the store. I breathed a sigh of relief and thanked the customer who had spoken up for me. As I left the store, I couldn't help but reflect on what had just happened. It was clear that Karen had a sense of entitlement and believed that the world revolved around her. She had no regard for anyone else's feelings or needs and was willing to lie and manipulate to get her way. I felt sorry for her in a way, but I also knew that people like her never learn unless they're forced to face the consequences of their actions. Maybe getting kicked out of the store and embarrassed in front of everyone would teach her a lesson, but I doubted it. In any case, I was just glad it was over. I got into my car and drove back to my apartment, feeling a little shaken, but also proud of myself for standing up to Karen. It wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do. As I sat down at my computer to start working on my latest coding project, I couldn't help but smile to myself. I may not be able to change the world, but I could make a small difference in someone's life. And if that meant standing up to entitled people like Karen, then so be it. Background: I own a 32-unit facility that houses felons who have finished their sentences and need some help returning to society. Each unit houses 2 clients. We do stuff like teach them computer skills and help them learn to cook, build a resume, stuff like that. At 6 a.m., about 2 hours ago, my night manager calls me and tells me there's a lady pounding on the front door, insisting she needs to talk to whoever is in charge. So I told him to give her my number. Before I'm even off the phone with him, she's calling me. Before I can even introduce myself, she goes off accusing me of kidnapping her son. This man is 34 and here 100% of his own free will. And forcing him to work for me. He doesn't work for me. He works at the recycling center. Then she goes into how, as his mother, she needs to see what kind of conditions he's living in, but he refuses to let her visit. According to her, he would never refuse to see her, unless he was under duress. So what she demands that I do, is to come to the facility and unlock his door so she can go in and look around. I told her that that's not going to happen. I'm not letting her into someone else's home. She is not a resident here. Her son is not the only person who lives in that space, and I would need permission from both her son and his roommate to let her in. She has no right to be here. Now please get off of our property or we will have you trespassed. This caused her to shriek, "How dare you," into the phone, and tell me that if she isn't let into the room within 10 minutes, she was going to call the cops and have me charged with kidnapping. I tell her, go ahead, and I hang up. I wasn't at the facility, but from the security cam footage, it appears that when the cops that she had called showed up, and she explained the situation to them, her son came to the front door and told the cops he didn't want to see her and that we didn't kidnap him. She went into a rage and attacked her son, but he didn't get hurt. He just backed up and slammed the door. The cops took her away. I don't know what's going to happen to her, but seeing that dude's mom, he didn't have a great start in life. I'm Lily, a 25-year-old student who works part-time at a local cafe to make ends meet. I usually enjoy my job, but today was different. It started with an unusual customer who walked in with an entitled attitude that could make anyone cringe. The customer, whom I'll call Karen, was in her mid-40s and had a severe case of resting witch face. She marched up to the counter, snapped her fingers, and demanded a coffee with extra foam, no sugar, and served in a ceramic mug. I took her order with a forced smile and tried to ignore her condescending tone. As I was making Karen's coffee, I heard her talking to her friend who had joined her at the table. "I can't believe these millennials have the nerve to work in the service industry," Karen said loudly. "They have no work ethic and are just lazy." I rolled my eyes and took a deep breath. I've heard these comments before, but it still stung. I finished Karen's coffee and brought it to her table, hoping she would leave soon. But she didn't. She sat there for hours, hogging the table and complaining about everything. At one point, Karen called me over and pointed to a spot on her mug. "There's a smudge here. I can't drink from this," she said. "Get me a new one." I wanted to scream, but I kept my composure and got her a new mug. Karen didn't even say thank you. Instead, she complained about the temperature of her coffee, the music playing in the background, and the fact that her friend's latte had a slightly different shade of foam than hers. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Karen got up to leave. But before she did, she turned to me and said, "You should be grateful for this job. Without people like me, you'd be unemployed." That was the last straw. I couldn't take it anymore. "Actually, Karen," I said, my voice shaking with anger, "I'm working here to pay for my college tuition, and I'm grateful for every penny I earn. But I don't have to put up with your entitled attitude. You can leave now." Karen was taken aback. Excuse me, how dare you talk to me like that? I demand to speak to your manager. I shrugged. Sure thing. Let me get her for you. I walked to the back of the cafe, took a deep breath, and returned with my manager, who had heard the whole exchange. Is there a problem here, ma'am? My manager asked, her voice firm but polite. Yes, there is, Karen said, pointing at me. Your employee was rude to me and refused to serve me properly. I demand a refund and a written apology. My manager turned to me and raised an eyebrow. Is that true, Lily? I shook my head. No, it's not. Karen was being rude and entitled the entire time. I tried my best to serve her, but she kept complaining and insulting me. My manager looked at Karen and sighed. I'm sorry, ma'am, but I have to side with my employee on this one. We don't tolerate disrespectful behavior towards our staff. You can either leave peacefully or be escorted out. Karen huffed and threw a few bills on the table. Fine, keep your coffee. I'll never come back here again. Good riddance, I muttered. As Karen got up to leave, she heard me. She grabbed the cup of coffee that I had just made for her and hurled it in my direction. Luckily, I was able to dodge it, but the hot liquid splashed on the counter and the floor. My manager and I were shocked. That's it, my manager said, taking out her phone. I'm calling the police. Karen tried to leave, but my manager blocked her way. You're not going anywhere until the police arrive, she said. You just assaulted my employee. Karen's friend looked embarrassed and tried to apologize, but it was too late. Within minutes, 2 police officers arrived at the cafe and took statements from me, my manager, and Karen. The officers were not amused by Karen's entitled behavior and the fact that she had assaulted me. Ma'am, you're under arrest for assault and battery, one of the officers said, handcuffing Karen. Karen was taken to the police station, still protesting and claiming that she had done nothing wrong. Meanwhile, my manager gave me the rest of the day off and offered to pay for any dry cleaning or medical bills if needed. I felt shaken and angry, but also relieved that justice was being served. I decided to press charges against Karen and testify in court. A few weeks later, I received a subpoena to appear in court as a witness. I was nervous but determined to speak up against entitled people like Karen. In court, Karen tried to play the victim and blame me for everything, but the evidence was clear, and the judge found her guilty of assault and battery. Karen was ordered to pay a fine and perform community service. I didn't feel satisfied with the punishment, but at least she was held accountable for her actions. After the trial, I went back to work at the cafe. I received an outpouring of support from my colleagues and customers who praised me for standing up to Karen. Some even left me generous tips and kind notes. I realized that although entitled people like Karen could be frustrating and hurtful, there were also good people in the world who appreciated hard work and kindness. I felt proud to be part of that community and to have stood up for myself and others like me.